connected in the unity of being. Yet quantum physics also says that the ground of being for all this being will never be completely subsumed by rational thinking. Very, very deep material. On page 186, human consciousness has entered, or is in the process of entering, a more advanced stage in the evolution of consciousness. They wrap up on page 188. The essential truth revealed by science, which the religious imagination should now begin to explore with the intent of enhancing its ethical dimensions, was described by Erwin Schrödinger as follows. Hence, this life of yours, which you are living, is not merely a piece of the entire existence, but is, in a certain sense, the whole. Only this whole is not so constituted that it can be surveyed in one single glance. Virtually all major religious traditions have at some point featured this understanding in their mystical traditions, in constructs like the Noon of the Egyptians, the Ein Sof of the Hebrews, the Father of the Judeo-Christians, the Allah of the Sufis, the Tao of the Chinese, the Brahman of the Vedantins, and the Paramashiva of the Shivites. And the history of religious thought reveals a progression in virtually all religious traditions towards the concept of spiritual reality as a unified essence in which the self is manifested, or better mirrored, in intimate connection with the whole. This would seem to suggest that the evolution of human consciousness in both scientific and religious thought is toward the affirmation of the existence of the single significant whole, and that these two versions of the ultimate truth exist in complementary relation. It is also important to note that the scientific worldview, as Schrödinger also appreciated, simply cannot in itself satisfy our need to better understand the character of ultimate truth. Schrödinger noted, "The scientific picture of the real world around me is very deficient. It gives me a lot of factual information, it puts all our experience in a magnificently consistent order, but it is ghastly silent about all and sundry that is really dear to our heart, that really matters to us." It's time, we suggest, for the religious imagination and the religious experience to engage the complementary truths of science in filling that silence with meaning. Powerful book. Very beautifully written, as you can tell by some of my readings out of it. It's a 214-page book. Beautiful little book. I'd highly recommend it. But you notice how they are beginning to say, typical Western science, because we're based on Greek objective thinking, which was misguided in the first place. There is no objective. Now that quantum physics has come to full maturity, there are still various different interpretations of quantum physics, however, I gotta tell you. Well, I mean, hey, Evan Harris Walker, in The Physics of Consciousness, the Quantum Mind, and the Meaning of Life. This is a basic books, the year 2000. Evan Harris Walker, he's the founder of the Walker Cancer Institute, incidentally. He had his PhD in physics from the University of Maryland in 1964, and he's published more than 100 papers in scientific journals, and he holds a dozen patents. I mean, this guy's he's quite an animal. Very interesting text. Very well written book. It's quite huge. Fairly new. Page 57. Born showed that these matter waves are actually waves of probability. Schrödinger's wave equation is a formula that enables one to find the amplitude of these probability waves. Incredibly, matter can have an imaginary existence. He says that on page 79. On page 63, I've got to hop, skip, and jump to try to get as much of this overview as I can. The details are enormously fascinating. It's not only a probability wave, but at the same time it is the complete representation of any object or physical system for which it has been obtained as the solution to the Schrödinger equation. This is the Greek psi wave. They use the Greek psi sign. Page 65. Matter is not really both particle and wave, but rather discrete packets of energy that dart from place to place in a frenzy of quantum jumps that ebb and flow in waves of chance. It is a world in which nothing stays long where it should be, but only stays where it could be. That is so true. The atoms dance and the electrons hop, zipping about from the wildly random thermal commotion and from the blurry speed with which probability waves speckle the tiny electrons around their nuclei, painting fleeting mazes into solid things like you and me and her. And yet none of this is what is there. All of this motion is frozen. All this darting and all these quantum jumps exist only as potentialities. The jumps and darts happen when measurement take place, when we observe, and when things interact with other things. We cannot view the probability waves as arising because real discrete particles of matter in precise locations with exact speeds dart about so fast or so discontinuously that we can't follow their true paths. No. They have no path. They have no exact place and no exact momentum. They exist as potentialities at all these places at once. A frozen static frenzy, the silent excitement of nature. Now, particles do exist, but their states are represented by waves of probabilities. This is the resolution of the wave-particle duality paradox. Very interesting. Skipping to... and he talks more about the psi wave on page 86, of course. Here we go on page 91. The way quantum mechanics describes how objects behave is very peculiar. It describes reality as a collection of potential realities, a collection of pictures of the world that include all the things we expect could be found in a measurement. Wow. Page 95. When a second system interacts with the first system, all that happens is that we get an even more complicated system with more potential states, a bigger psi wave with more little psi component pictures than before. The measurement device we use to look at quantum mechanical atoms is itself governed by the Schrödinger equation, and therefore it cannot give us anything but a more complicated psi wave that is made out of the set of pictures that represents the overall system's potentialities. But observation is just a euphemism for consciousness, for mind. This interpretation of quantum mechanics says that the system undergoes state vector collapse because of our